Thank you and welcome to Conscious Evolution Media. I am your executive producer and for the show, and also the founder of Conscious Evolution Media. And this show is going out live on Comcast Channel 56, as well as being streamed on consciousevolutionmedia.com. And it is my greatest pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Joe Rubino. He is one of the most well-known experts and authority on self-esteem. And who couldn't use a little improvement on self-esteem? I think everybody could, right?
For sure.
And I think Dr. Joe's plan is to have minimum 20 million adults and 20 million children be exposed to this work. And I also want to make sure I mention that Dr. Rubino has written 11 books, and it has been translated to 24 different languages. And I'm waiting for the Hungarian version. Dr. Joe, the platform is all yours.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you and welcome both to our studio audience today and to our viewers at home. Today I'm going to be speaking about a topic that's near and dear to my heart. And that topic is the #1 ingredient to success and happiness in life. We all want success and happiness, but it's kind of this mythical, hard to get your hands around thing that we think that we know what it is, but when we get there, we're often disappointed. So what is success? Is it making a certain amount of money? Is it achieving a position or fame or fortune? Is it having the big house on the hill? Is it all surrounding ourselves with luxury and the cars and all the things that we think that we want? Or is it the sort of thing that when we are striving for success, it's like climbing a ladder that reaches off into the clouds. And we climb up those steps of the ladder, we struggle, we suffer, we think, once we get to the end of that ladder, then I'll be successful, then I'll be happy. But what happens? We get there and we find out it's not quite what I thought it was going to be. There might be something else still yet to strive for, that we can reach for, so we climb further into those clouds. We strive for another thing, and we think that once I achieve that, then I'll be happy, then I'll be successful. But what happens? When we get there, then we're perhaps disappointed again. So I'm going to offer you a different definition of success. For me, success is being on the path that honors our most important core values, that empowers us, that inspires us, en route to achieving our life purpose, the things that are mattering most to us in life. And all the time while doing that, we're having fun, we're pursuing our passions, we're inspiring others, we're contributing our gifts to the world. And the operative term along this definition is enjoying the process. Because how often do we not enjoy the process? How often do we live life suffering and struggling? You know, suffering is about having something we don't want or wanting something we don't have. And it's always optional. And it always involves lack of responsibility for making our life work more optimally. I was there once. Allow me for just a minute to tell you my own story. I went through the typical educational process, studied hard in high school, graduated at the top of my class, went on to college, studied hard there, went into dental school. At the age of 24, I had arrived, so I thought. I was a practicing dentist. I had purchased a practice right out of dental school. Surely I should be happy, right? Well, maybe I haven't practiced long enough, so let me practice for a while. Within the first 5 years, my business partner and I purchased 5 different dental practices of 5 retiring doctors within our town and the town next to ours. We combined them into 2 offices. Long story short, after 10 years, I'm a success by society standards, and I'm miserable. I'm not having any fun. I'm not enjoying my practice. Now, there's nothing wrong with the practice of dentistry. It's a noble profession. It's a necessary profession. But for me, something was missing, but I didn't really know what that was. I was making a lot of money. I had the respect of my patients and the respect of my colleagues. We had 250 new patients coming into one of my practices alone per month. So what was it going to take for me to be successful if that wasn't it? I entered into a year-long personal development program that has now continued for 23 years. And what I found was it's not achieving those things if your values are being dishonored, if you're not having fun, if you're not recreating and pursuing your passions and enjoying the process and inspiring and living your values along the way. The key to success is actually self-motivation. When we see our success as inevitable, we're motivated to do the things, to take the actions that are necessary in order to achieve the things that we want. And the secret to generating that self-motivation is actually a crystal clear vision that's aligned with our values. Now, that vision needs to be concrete and specific. It needs to be one that empowers us. It needs to be one that honors every one of our important values. Values are the fabric that form who we are at our innermost being, our core. And when the threads of that fabric are pulled, when our values are being dishonored, life doesn't work optimally. We shut down in our communication. We become angry. We become depressed. And we wonder why. And that's where I was as a dentist, a very resigned dentist, a very introverted dentist, a dentist who many of my friends used to joke that I couldn't lead 3 people in silent prayer. And I bought into that. Why? Because I had created lots of evidence throughout my life that that's just who I was, and there wasn't much that I could do about it. And of course, we all buy into different things or make stuff up about ourselves and about other people and about the world that just doesn't support us, doesn't support our happiness, doesn't support our personal power, doesn't support our effectiveness with people, doesn't support who we want to be in life. So what we're going to be talking about today is actually a formula. It's a formula for connecting the dots or painting by number in such a way that we could actually create a crystal clear vision that's consistent with manifesting our dream life. You know, we all have a vision. And all we have to do is look around us to see what's showing up in our lives. Because whatever we're manifesting is exactly consistent with the vision that we have for our lives. The amount of money that we have in our lives, the amount of friends and close relationships, the amount of fun that we're having, the amount of fulfilling work or lack of fulfilling work like I was experiencing, it's all consistent with our present vision for life. And it's also possible to create a new vision, as if we had a magic wand and we could wave it over our lives and we could create a vision that's empowering and inspiring, that honors all of our core values, that we can't wait to get up every day for the next 300 years to fulfill that vision. That's what's possible. You know, we have this internal mechanism within us that directs our self-motivation. Now, a minute ago, I told you that self-motivation was the key to creating the action that's necessary. You know, if you had a football stadium and you filled it full of people, 100,000 people, and you asked them, how many of you want to be happy? Everyone would raise their hands, jump up and down. Everybody wants to be happy. Now, if you ask those same people, how many of you already are happy? You'd get a far fewer saying that they're already achieving the happiness that they want. And why is that? It's because when we're wanting something, we don't have it. It's because when we're living in the lack of that, we're suffering. Suffering is having something we don't want or wanting something we don't have. And it always involves lack of responsibility. So when we're left with the wanting of it, we think that it's out there, we're striving for it, we're trying to get it, but we're miserable along the way. And that's why, as I mentioned, true success is enjoying the process. It's being inspired by the daily course of events that allow us to learn, allow us to grow. It's about discovering the problems that come into our lives and actually embracing those problems and finding the gifts that each of those problems or challenges offer to us. Because we need the problems, because we need the gifts. So we have the opportunity here to look at life in a different way. And when we do that, we become empowered, we become self-motivated. Internally, our internal psyche works like a thermostat. When we expect great things to happen in our future, when we expect to be wealthy, when we expect to have rich relationships, when we expect to be fulfilled in our work, when we expect to be happy, what happens? We generate the self-motivation that's necessary in order to do the things that are required to get there. And if we encounter a stop in our life, what happens? We see our bright future as inevitable. So those stops are temporary. We can break through those stops. We actually don't let them stop us at all Because of the fact that the way that we operate is when we see it as inevitable, nothing will stop us. You know, Napoleon Hill talked about having a burning desire for us to achieve our dreams and our goals. And that's a critical component, but it's not enough. I'm here today to tell you that unless you see your success as inevitable, where not only do you expect it, but you will do anything when you don't realize those expectations. You'll break through any stops. You'll have insights that will allow you to overcome any challenges. You'll actually get to continue to take the actions, tweak those actions, get coaching, support with people that have done it before, whatever it takes, because you see it as inevitable. The opposite is true with that thermostat as well. When we expect to fail, when we expect to be poor all of our lives, when we expect to have broken relationships or about the same amount of non-fulfilling relationships as we've always had, when we expect to not enjoy our work, what happens? We self-sabotage. We then do the things that cause us to stay stuck and suffering. And then we get to be right about, I told you so. I told you wealth was for some other person. I told you that I really didn't want to be wealthy because, you know, wealth isn't for good people. Good people are poor. Or I told you that fulfilling work is a dream, but you know what? I have to put food on the table for my family, so it's not something that I can achieve. Or, you know what? I'm just an introvert. That's what I told myself for decades, 3.5 decades, that I don't have a whole lot of rich relationships. You know why? Because that's just the way I am. There's not much I can do about it. And of course, all that is a lie. It's a lie that allows us to self-sabotage. It's a lie that allows us to stay stuck in suffering and to then justify our behavior and say, I told you and I'm right about it. We get to be right. We get to make others wrong. We get to feel sorry for ourselves. We get to evoke the pity of other people. And we get to stay stuck in suffering. And most of all, we get to avoid responsibility for our lives. Most of us live somewhere between those two extremes. The extreme of expecting great things to happen in our lives and being self-motivated to achieve those things on purpose, or expecting horrible things and then doing the things that sabotage our lives, ruining our relationships, getting fired from our job, quitting school, developing an alcohol or a drug addiction, whatever those things are. We live typically between those extremes. And what does that look like? It looks like basing our future on the past. It looks like taking our history and deciding that I'm capable and worthy of this much wealth, this many relationships, this much fun, this kind of fulfilling work or non-fulfilling work, and that's what I expect to manifest into the future. So what do? We try awful hard. We study, we read books, we listen to shows, whatever we do. But why? What happens? We get small incremental advances in our ability to achieve all those things that we want. Why? Why don't we have the breakthroughs? It's because we base our future on the past. Well, I'm here to tell you today that you have this magic wand that I'm giving you right now, that you had at birth, but you forgot that you had it. And when you wave it over your life, you can have it all. And we're going to talk in detail about just what that looks like. How can you have it all? What is the three-step process that will require you to reinvent yourself in a way that allows you to have it all? Well, that three-step process is based on the number one ingredient for success and happiness in life. And that number one ingredient is high self-esteem. So, what is high self-esteem? There has been probably no term in our vocabulary that is more misunderstood than self-esteem. So many people associate high self-esteem with high ego. They think, very incorrectly, that Hitler had high self-esteem. And by my definition, Hitler had about as low a self-esteem level as you could possibly get. Why? Well, I'll explain why. By my definition of high self-esteem, there are 5 critical components. The first component is personal power. Personal power means when we speak, other people listen. It's like that old E.F. Hutton commercial, you know, when E.F. Hutton speaks, people listen. People with personal power demand respect. They demand to be heard. And when you have personal power, people gravitate to you. They gravitate toward your charisma. What is charisma? It's about an energy that we exude that welcomes people in. Now, the second component, besides personal power, is competence. Competence is being able to take an idea of what you want to manifest in all key areas of life and being able to take those ideas and translate them into reality with velocity. Now, velocity is important because those people that struggle and suffer don't have personal power and they don't have the competence to manifest their dream life. But high self-esteem people believe in themselves. They believe in their ability to create rich relationships with other people who will become their partners and their champions. They believe in the great abundance in the world and the great support that is out there everywhere, visibly and invisibly, to support us to achieve all of our goals. The third component of high self-esteem individuals is worthiness. People who have high self-esteem feel good about who they are. They're not constantly embarrassed about the things that they do. They're not constantly feeling as though they're ashamed of themselves. They're not feeling as though they have to hide who they are, so they put on a false facade or an act that hides what everyone is going to see because they don't want to show who they are. They're not vulnerable at all because they don't want people to know who they really think they are because they're not proud of who they are. They're ashamed of that. And so low self-esteem individuals oftentimes put on that act. They're phonies. They try to cover up. They try to put on a class clown act or some sort of cover-up because the last thing they want is to people to find out who they really are. The fourth component of high self-esteem individuals is significance. People who feel that they're significant attract the attention and the affection of other people. They feel like they're lovable and that they love others. That love is free-flowing and really a torrent of love is available for them and for others in their lives. Also, when they make mistakes, they forgive themselves, so they have the capacity to now forgive others. Because as long as you aren't willing to forgive yourself, you will find in others the very same faults that you find in yourself. So those people who don't hold themselves as worthy will focus on the flaw, their own flaws and the flaws of others. That's why they'll constantly be in struggle, constantly be in relationship upsets with other people, constantly hold grudges, constantly try to get vengeance because they don't hold themselves or others as worthy and significant. The number 5 critical component that separates high from low self-esteem individuals is an appreciation for what it's like in the other person's world with respect and living by the golden rule. Now, what do I mean by that? People with high self-esteem live by the golden rule in that they do to others as they would want them to do to them. So high ego people, by contrast, live out of the assumption that I need to get whatever I need to get, even if it's at the expense of other people. So when we live at the expense of other people, we abuse them, we do things that are deceitful, we do things that we're not proud of, and we certainly don't feel good about who we are. So all of these 5 points are interconnected, and they're critically important in order for us to live a life that is empowered with that high expectation that I spoke about. Now, it's important because when we look at all of the ills that plague our society, everything from school dropouts, poverty, alcohol and drug addiction, bullying, abusive relationships, violence, crime, divorce, and even war, they're all sourced in low self-esteem. So the contrary is true as well. All the people who are inspirational, who are empowering, who live by that golden rule of contributing to others, making others' lives greater than their focus on their own life, they all have that high self-esteem. And those are critical components. Low self-esteem, in contrast, always begins typically early on in life, usually before the age of 6. What happens? One of 2 occurrences. Either someone says or does something negative, and we as a little kid buy into that negativity. So it could be a name that we're called, maybe we're called an ethnic slur, maybe it's a bullying episode or a spanking. Someone says or does something that says, you're stupid, you smell funny, you don't belong, nobody likes you, nobody loves you, you're flawed, you're imperfect. And we say, you know what? Let me look. I think you're right. And from that point on, we now start to scan for and find evidence after evidence after evidence that reinforces our worst fear. The other way that it happens is very innocently. Instead of buying into somebody else's negativity, someone else might say something that's very much not meant to hurt us. Maybe a parent will say something like, "What's the matter with you?" And we, as a little kid, will say, "Geez, I don't know. Let me look." And we find all these things that are the matter with us. And we now start to create that same self-fulfilling prophecy that it occurs just as if we bought into somebody else's negativity. Or maybe a friend of ours says, "I'm going home now." And we think, "You're going home because you don't want to be with me." Nobody wants to be with me. And so we make up that we're unlovable. Nobody wants to be our friend. So it doesn't matter if we make something up or we buy into some negativity. The origins might start that way, but what's really important is that over the years and then the decades, literally, we have developed first dozens and then hundreds of thousands eventually of episodes of evidence after evidence, situation after situation, lodged in our minds that we absolutely know that that's just the way we are. And there's nothing that we can do about it. And that's just the way other people are. And that's just the way the world is. Because from that time of our earliest upsets, we've lived hundreds and then thousands of these upsets where we make something up about ourselves, we make something up about others, and we make something up about the world in general. And what happens? We see ourselves as imperfect. We see others initially as having more perfection than we do. All we have to do is look around. We'll find athletes who are better athletes in more prime physical condition than we are. We look at movie and TV stars. They're better looking than we are. They have all the charisma that we lack. We'll look in our neighborhood and we'll see people that are light and we're not light. We don't belong. We don't fit in. So we scan for and find the flaw. We look for and listen for ways to invalidate ourselves. And while we're invalidating ourselves, we're creating more evidence that reinforces that initial fear that we developed early on in life. So as we do this month after month, week after week, day after day, year after year, before long, we're absolutely convinced, as I was at the age of 36, that I was an extreme introvert, that I was just the kind of person that didn't have many gifts. I didn't know that I could write. I knew that I couldn't speak. I would swear by it, and people would laugh at the fact that... I remember I was at a social meeting once, and there were about 30 people at the meeting, and the person who was hosting the meeting just said, "Get up and just tell everybody who you are." And I remember standing up, and I opened my mouth, and nothing came out. And I sat down, mortified, and I had then just created one more piece of evidence that I not only don't have anything to share, but that's just who I am. There's nothing I can do about it. So we create this lie, this series of lies, this life that is a lie that we buy into. And not only do we buy into it about ourselves, but we make stuff about other people. We make stuff up about other people that says people are, and you fill in the blanks. People are mean and cruel. People are selfish. People are egotistical. I made up something when I was 5 years old. I was playing down by the schoolyard, and some teenagers came, and they decided to have a little game of football. And they decided to use me as their football. So they handed me off, and they ladled me back and forth, and one guy went to pass me long. And what happened? I fell, hit my head on the concrete, went home crying with a big egg on my head. I made up I was small and insignificant at age 5. I made up that people were mean and cruel. They didn't care about me, and they didn't care about anything but themselves. And I made up that the world was a cruel and dangerous place. And I lived that way for the first 36 years of my life. there was no accident that I became a dentist. Dentists are people who, what? Yeah, they help people, but they also hurt people, don't they? They cause pain. And they're also people who get to talk without having to have people talk back at them. And that was no accident. So I had created this invisible life that had run me, as we all do. Not knowing what runs us keeps us in that same drama cycle, that same cycle of suffering and grieving and suffering and creating more evidence that doesn't support us. That vicious cycle is one that we're going to break today. And we're going to break it by a three-step system. And this system is the self-esteem system that I use personally to not only make my life work optimally, but to also champion hundreds of thousands of people to make their lives work more optimally as well. So this self-esteem system is consisting of three components. These are completing and healing your past, assessing what's so right now in your present, designing your future and choice. Let's look at the first of those three components. The first is healing and completing your past. Now, as I mentioned a minute ago, we all make things up as kids, usually before the age of 6. Some people make things up in utero. Some make things up early on in life, at the age of 1 or 2 or even younger. Others, they don't recall those episodes, but it doesn't matter because you are constantly reliving the same sort of upsets in your life month after month, year after year. It's a function of the same thing you couldn't be with when you were 3, when you were playing with matches and you burnt down the house, or when you were 5 and you were bullied in the schoolyard, or when you were 7 years old and you were abused by a neighbor. Whatever that episode was early on in life, you made something up about yourself and about others and about the world, and you now began to believe that it was true. So what is healing and completing your past about? It's about first reframing faulty interpretations, interpretations that don't support you. You know, when we were young, we made things up about ourselves, and then we ended up, as I said, we bought into them, we created the evidence, we created this downward spiral that was based on situation after situation of evidence. And we think that we're stuck with it. We can't change history. But it's not the history that bothers us. It's our interpretations of history. Because what we're left with are those things that are deeply felt, those things that stay with us, that we remember all of our lives, those painful experiences. They might have been growth experiences, but they were painful, and so we remember them. And we model our personalities around them. And before we know it, we now develop the persona of who we are and who others are and what the world is all about based upon these faulty interpretations. So I'm here to tell you that we have the ability to create new interpretations, and we're going to talk about how to do that now. And those new interpretations are ones where we're no longer at the effect of what someone said or did to us, because in reality, no one did anything to us. We bought into something, we made something up. We can also make up that people do the best they know how to do. People operate from good intentions. And that's a declaration that we make. Not like it's true, but it empowers us. Why? Because when we're not attached to someone's opinions, we can become 10 feet tall and bulletproof. Because as long as we're attached to what other people say and do, we're constantly listening to be invalidated. We're constantly listening to be offended. We're constantly putting ourselves down, getting into relationship conflicts, having low self-esteem, damaging others with our behavior that doesn't support us, and creating interpretations about the world being a place of scarcity, of mean people, whatever, that really doesn't support us to move forward powerfully. So we have the ability to manage that negative self-talker. I like to call him Chip. He or she is a little function of an early detractor, someone that said or did something to us, that internal voice that we oftentimes confuse with our intuition. And our negative self-talk is very different from our intuition. Our intuition is always right on. It's always sourced in high self-esteem. It's always sourced in love. It's a function of our higher selves, and it's always accurate. Our negative self-talk is there for two reasons. Chip is there either to prove that you're good enough when you think that you're not, so that you're constantly on that treadmill trying to prove that you're good enough, so you're working hard, you're telling other people off, you can't be with something about yourself, so you're out to prove that you're not whatever it is you can't be with. Or Chip's job is instead to keep you safe, to keep you from risking, to keep you from getting hurt. So he or she tells you, play small. Don't go to that party. Remember when you went to the party the last time, what happened? You ended up hanging out behind the plant, feeling worse than you did before you went to the party because nobody wants to talk to you, because you have nothing to share with anybody. So the last time you were offered that job, what happened? You turned it down because you couldn't be with the possibility of failing. You couldn't be with the possibility that you could invalidate yourself. When we listen to Chip's misguided but well-intentioned counsel, we keep this negative drama cycle in place. We keep suffering, we keep struggling, we get to be right about whatever it is that we made up about ourselves. So how do we manage the negative self-talk? The first thing that we can do is we can start to recognize when we are in that negative self-talking mode. We have to recognize when Chip's talking to us. Differentiate it from our intuition. Is it based in love? Is it based from a heart sense or a head sense? Chip talks from the head, not from the heart. Chip talks from fear, talks from anger and sadness, not from anger and sadness being up here, not from the heart, not from love and intuition. Those are keys to guiding us effectively. So when we hear Chip talking, what do? Thank you for sharing. Now shut up and take a hike. And we replace Chip's well-intentioned but misguided advice with an affirmation of who we really are. So what happens? What does that look like? Chip tells us, you don't want to go to that party because when you went to the party last time, remember what happened? Thank you for sharing, Chip. Shut up, take a hike. I'm going to affirm that what I am is a good friend. And I'm going to take action that's 180 degrees in opposition to my greatest fear. So what am I going to do? I'm going to go to the party and I'm going to make some friends. I'm going to find someone who's shyer and more introverted than I am at that party. I'm going to make their day. I'm going to make their day special. I'm going to make them feel better than I found them. And when you can do that, when you can, one, manage your negative self-talk, when you can create an affirmation about who you really are based on a declaration, and that declaration does not have to have evidence that you've done this before, because it's a bold declaration based upon courage. It's kind of like Babe Ruth taking his bat and pointing over the right field fence and saying, I'm going to hit it there. And he's going to hit it because he says he's going to hit it there. And when you declare who you are, you're going to ask yourself, what are the qualities that I want to be known for? What are the qualities that I want to leave people with? And when you live from that declaration, you're living from an empowering possibility that you now get to step into. And when you step into and you affirm who you are, you now get to create new evidence. The more you do that for 30 days, you've created a habit. You do it beyond that, you've now created a new reality for yourself. And that's what personal reinvention is all about. It's creating a new reality based on your declarations that support you rather than the evidence that disempowers you. So how do we do that? One of the ways that we do that is we learn to manage our emotional addictions. We're all addicted to these emotional reactive states in life. And these run our lives because we don't know that they're running our lives. Here's what happens. Remember I told you early on in life when we were kids, someone says or does something, and this is our initial upset. So what happens? Someone says or does something, we make something up about ourselves, or we buy into some negativity, and what happens? It gives us our mood. It gives us an emotional reactive state initially that we now develop as a habit over life. That emotional reactive state is typically a form of anger or sadness or fear. When we are addicted to those emotions, they run us, but we don't know that they run us. If you look at the state of the world right now, you'll see that the majority of the people in the world are addicted to anger. That's why we have so much violence, so much hatred, so much war, so much of all the things that we don't want. It's because people are addicted, like heroin addicts, to the anger. For a great amount of people, that anger was inappropriate, unacceptable, so they stuffed the anger. So what happened? Those people became addicted to sadness. Depending upon the study and who you ask, the group that does the survey, there's somewhere between 280 and 350 million people worldwide that are addicted to sadness. These are people who are clinically depressed. These are people who live scanning for and finding interpretations to be sad about, reasons to be depressed in their lives. This is so powerful that it changes brain chemistry. This is a physiological, emotional combination. People do become depressed. And these people have a tendency to, over the years, have created these interpretations that have created a reality for their lives that is based on an addiction to sadness. They have the heroin addiction, like the heroin addict that says, whenever I am sad, I get another shot of this addiction into my veins. They don't like being sad, but sadness gives them an identity. It allows them to be right about something. It allows them to feel as though they're a victim. And so you can't blame them because they're victims. It wasn't my fault. I was depressed. I couldn't do anything. I was just on the couch eating bonbons. I was depressed all day. It's because not only do these people get to feel sorry for themselves, they get to evoke the sympathy and the pity of other people, and they get to avoid responsibility for their lives. And that's key for all addictions. That's key for all reactive emotional states. The third, besides anger and sadness, is fear. Studies show 22% of women and 16% of men are addicted to fear. These are people who worry about everything all the time. It doesn't matter what they're going to be worried about, they will find something to worry about, whether it's losing their job, losing their spouse, a tsunami, a terrorist attack, the bad weather, the economy going south. They will find something to worry about because it gives them their addiction. So most people go throughout their lives not fully aware that they are running their lives in a way that's invisibly run by these addictive reactive states. So what do? We can recognize these states when they show up, and I'm going to give you an exercise right now that if you're willing to take it on, you're willing to map it onto your life will change remarkably, and I'll guarantee that. Here's the exercise. It's to keep an upset journal. Every time you're in an upset, write the answers to these questions down in your journal. And the journal can be a loose-leaf notebook, a spiral-bound notebook. You can keep it on a Word document on your computer, as long as you get into the habit of tracking the answers to these questions. And every time you're in an upset, ask yourself these questions. The upset, first of all, is going to be triggered by one form of emotion. You're going to find what runs you. Is it a form of anger? Is it indignant anger, like how dare you, that ran me for 36 years before I now started to recognize and manage it? Is it frustrated anger? Is it rage? If you're addicted to sadness, is it forlorn sadness? Or is it frustrated sadness? Or is it abject depression? If it's fear, do you worry? Or are you constantly on the edge, paralyzed by life? So get to know what runs you in the background, so now you have the ability to recognize it. Because once you recognize it, you write down what the upset is in your journal. You next write down, what are the facts? What did someone say or do that had you interpret or buy into whatever it was that made you angry, sad, or afraid? When you can separate out facts from interpretations by deciding and determining what is, first, the mood that you've created, by the interpretation, the meaning that you've given to what was said or done. And here's the key question. Are you willing to give up your right to be angry or sad or afraid? Because you know what? We don't want to be sad. We don't want to be angry. We don't want to be afraid. But oftentimes it's so addictive. It's so compulsive that we will do whatever just to get our fix. So sometimes we would rather be right. We'd rather be forceful, because when we're angry, we're forceful. We get to dominate other people. We get to make them wrong. We get to avoid being controlled by them. And that's all very addictive. When we're sad, we get to avoid responsibility for being happy. Happiness is a decision. We get to avoid that decision because we now get to feel sorry for ourselves. We get to evoke the pity and the sympathy of other people. And we get to avoid responsibility for doing things that will make us happy. Same with fear. When we're addicted to fear, we get to avoid responsibility for getting our needs met, for protecting ourselves, for making requests that are powerful, whatever it takes to manage fears, most of the time which are made up and not real at all. So when we can determine what is running us, and we're willing to give up our right to be addicted to our emotional reactive state, we now have the ability to create a new interpretation in that moment that empowers us, that motivates us, and supports us. So what does that look like? It looks like in the moment of an upset. Identify what your reactive emotional state is. What happened? What did you make up about that? Let's give an example. One of my clients was 8 years old when her mother said, "Don't go next door, I want you to stay in the yard." Well, she had just got a nice, pretty polka dot yellow dress. She put it on, she went next door, she was abused by the neighbor. 8 years old. What did she make up? She first became raging anger, and then it very quickly resolved into sadness and fear. So she made up that she was a bad girl, she didn't obey her mother, and she deserved this. She went on to marry 3 abusive husbands because doing so allowed her to get her fix. Her fix would get in whenever she would have men, in particular, being abusive, and she would get to be a victim, incapable of protecting herself. She didn't like being abused, she didn't like being a victim, but she was creating unintentionally this pattern because she was beating herself up from the age of 8 years old when she made a simple error in judgment as a little girl that she now was punishing herself for the rest of her life. And it wasn't until we did some work where she could heal her past, where she could complete it, then she could actually move on. She could now create a new interpretation for herself when she was willing to give up her right to be a victim, giving up her right to be angry at men, giving up her right to be angry at herself and depressed because of what mistakes she made, forgiving herself. So when she did that, she completed. Now she's married to a person that treats her like a king, like a queen, because of the fact that she now completed. When we're incomplete, we are bound to repeat whatever it is that we can't be within our past. So when we can create this exercise where we separate out facts from interpretations, we release the mood that keeps us in the soup, we create a new interpretation that empowers us. So somebody asks us to go to a party. What happens? Maybe we're paralyzed by fear because we don't want to look bad. We don't know what we're going to say. We manage it in that moment. We create a new interpretation that we're going to be somebody's best friend. We're going to go and make somebody's day better than us. We're going to take the focus off of our petty concerns, and we're going to go and contribute to somebody at that party. And when we do that, what's going to happen is we actually now get to empower our lives. We get to be a new possibility. We get to release what we made up about ourselves, and we get to create some new evidence in that moment. That keeps us in relationship with the person, and we take action that empowers us so that we now create a new pattern of evidence that supports us. So there are 3 keys to elevating self-esteem. The first is empathy. Empathy is having an appreciation for what it's like in the other person's world. When we have empathy, what someone says or does isn't up to us anymore, it's about them. 99% of an upset is about the person upset, and only 1% is about us. So what that translates into is that when we have empathy, we can try something on like a coat to see if it fits. If it fits, we can change our behavior. If it doesn't, we release it momentarily. We're no longer at the effect of other people's interpretations or judgments. We give up our right to be offended and invalidated. The second great key to elevating self-esteem is gratitude. When we can make every day Thanksgiving Day, we now can live with an appreciation. The law of attraction says that we make large whatever we focus upon. And when we live with gratitude, we focus upon all the blessings in our lives instead of all the petty concerns, all the faults, all the flaws and imperfections that if we focus on those, we make large. And the third key is forgiveness. Forgiveness is, I like to hold it as thank you for giving me the opportunity to learn and to grow from the experience that I needed for my own growth, my growth in empathy, my soul growth, for me to understand and to learn on this great school that we call life, this great planet. So when we live by forgiving ourselves, we now have the ability to forgive others. And when we forgive others, we complete and heal our past. So when we can implement those three qualities, having empathy, asking ourselves, what's it like in the other person's world to have them say and do the things that they do? What do I have to be grateful around that I can manifest, that I can look for, that I can make larger? And who haven't I forgiven yet, including myself? And how can I live with gratitude, acknowledging both myself and others on a daily basis moving forward? When we're able to manage upsets, we have an option. And that option is this. We can choose in the moment whether we want to be right or whether we want to be happy. And knowing we can't be both, we get to choose. You know, it's like the guy who was so intent on being right that on his gravestone, he had someone inscribe, "I told you I was sick." Why? Because we're all hell-bent on being right. And we'll sacrifice our happiness, our relationships, our health, our wealth, everything just to be right, because we get to then justify our behavior. So here I am to you today, with you today, inviting you to realize that failure is always an interpretation. So how can we move our lives forward? Let's look at quickly assessing what's so in our present. When we look at the 6 key areas of our lives and we look at what are our most important values, are those values being honored or not? What are the gifts that we have and the strengths, and are those strengths being shared with others? Are we developing our gifts? Are we sharing them in the world? Or are we thinking that we don't have any gifts like I did for so many decades? Are we accustomed to living our commitments? You know, we are all committed to something, and most of us are committed to our convenience. And the analogy I like to give is that we're walking down a forest path and we come to a fork in the road. And we have a choice in the moment to make a decision whether to follow the path that we've always worn before. That's the path where we step over things, where we feed our emotional addiction, where we make others wrong, where we get to be right, where we get to step into our stuff. Or we can take a new path by making a decision to do so in that moment. And to the extent that we decide in that moment to manage our emotional reactive state, to actually empower our lives, to take the focus off of ourselves and to contribute something to other people, we now get to develop a new path and a new habit. That new habit comes when we develop a powerful relationship to problems. By not only identifying problems, but welcoming them, embracing them, declaring them, we get to realize that every problem has within it for us a gift. And that gift is one where we actually get to experience life. We get to grow. And that's what I began the show with, talking about enjoying the process of life. It's all about recognizing your ability to discover your gifts, embrace problems, know what they are, and know that every problem has within it something that you need for your soul growth, for your emotional growth, for you to be more of who you can be as a possibility for others. And in the end, it's all about responsibility. Not like blame or fault, something that you should do, like we hold responsibility, but responsibility as the ability to respond. No matter what life gives us, it's for our blessing. It's for our benefit. And when we look at what's happening around us in life, we realize that it's exactly where we need to be. We might not like it in that moment, but it's exactly where we need to be. So when we take responsibility for our life, we ask ourselves questions like, who am I being that this is showing up around me in life? Who am I being that I have to experience this right now? And what's missing that, if put into place, would allow me to shift who I am in a way that will empower my life, that will have something else show up instead of the things that are showing up right now. And it's when we start to having completed our past, we have an assessment of what are our most important values. Are those values being honored or not? And how can we step into a new possibility where we can design our future in choice, as if we had that magic wand I talked about, where we can live from a declaration, where we can say, these are the qualities that I wanted to develop. So when I was in development, initially, thinking that this is just the way I was and there was nothing I could do about it, I decided the qualities that I wanted to be known for were love and creativity, contribution, and belonging. So what happened? I decided, okay, if I'm a contributor, how can I contribute in this moment? If I'm going to be an inspiration to myself and to others, how can I inspire someone when I was inspiring no one? If I'm going to be creative, how can I create? So we could actually declare who we are. We can step into that declaration on purpose as an existential act of courage, because we say that we are going to be these qualities. We're going to declare them, and just as we're declaring those qualities, we get to declare our life purpose. Our life purpose is something that is about who we are, the qualities that we're known for, the gifts that we want to manifest into the world. If we were to live the next 300 years of our life, what is something that we would love to do every day, every year for those 300 years that we'd never get tired of? And a life purpose need not be complicated. It could be something as simple as being love, or being creative, or being an inspiration, or being a champion of children or the elderly or pets or women, or being a teacher, or it's just something that comes naturally. We're either living our life purpose or we're not. Our life purpose is the umbrella that fuels the vision for our lives. That vision for our life is one that we get to manifest on purpose. Remember, we all have a vision, and whatever is showing up around us is consistent with that vision. So we get to create a new vision. I'm going to invite you to write a new vision for your life. Write it in first person present tense, as if it's already happening. Include in that vision, what are you doing on a daily basis? What are you having? What are the qualities you're known for? Who are the people that you're contributing to? And finally, what are the things that are showing up in your life as a result of you living and doing and being those qualities? So when you're being the qualities that you want to be known for, you're stepping into this new possibility, you're doing it, working at play, the things that empower you, you're contributing your gifts to the world, you'll now have the things that you want in your life. So that vision now is consistent with your life purpose. You're going to set goals that align with your vision. The goals are measurable and specific. They're set in time, 90-day goals, 30-day goals, 2-year goals, 5, 10-year goals. The goals are things that guide the actions that you're going to set in your life. The actions are things that you're going to do daily. What's a daily action commitment that you can make that will empower your life to achieve your goals so that you realize your vision and you're living your life purpose all the time? And of course, at the same time, you're in development. You're letting life train you. You're giving up your right to be invalidated. So you're debriefing after conversations. You're keeping journals, an upset journal, a journal about your personal power, a journal about the qualities you want to develop in life. And you're actually now starting to live deliberately. You're living your expectations. And that's really what distinguishes a high self-esteem individual from someone who is lacking high self-esteem. The high self-esteem individual person has an expectation for great things, takes responsibility for living on purpose, doing the things that will align with achieving the things that they want, which is part of their overall vision, which is always about contribution, contributing the things that make them special and the gifts that they are to the world. And it's always about people. It's never only about yourself, because a vision that's only about yourself is self-serving and it serves to inspire no one. So I'm here to tell you today that we all have the ability to, one, heal and complete our past, to give up our right to make ourselves wrong and invalidate ourselves, to forgive us, to heal, to move on, and to forgive those people who are keeping us stuck by the things that we've made up that we refuse to let go of. Once we've been willing to heal and to move forward, we've assessed what's so in the present, we now can move into the future. We can design a future that inspires us, a future that honors our values, a future that is setting goals that are based in action, and a personal development plan that allows us to manifest our dreams in all 6 key areas of life: our health and appearance, our wealth and our finances, our relationships, our job or our business, our spiritual and our personal development life, pursuing our passions and having fun and recreating. And I'm here to leave you with one thought. Don't do what I did for so many decades. Live in resignation, live in apathy. Think that that's all that there is and there's not a whole lot that you can do about it. Know that you have that magic wand. You can wave it over your life. You can create the life of your dreams. And realize what it's costing you not to. Because unless you realize what the costs are, and once those costs are so totally unacceptable so that you can develop the self-motivation to break through the stops that are keeping you stuck, that's what it will require for you to live that dream life. I invite you to step into that new possibility. I wish you Godspeed in doing that. Thank you for listening. Have a great day.